The two undercover detectives never saw it coming, and by the time Rennell Wilson pulled the trigger, his rise from the Stapleton houses to Row was nearly complete. Rennell Earl Wilson was born in 1982 in Staten Island, New York. He grew up in the Stapleton houses, a public housing complex where street life often decided your future. He joined young, and over time, he climbed. Locals called the group he ran with the Stapleton Crew, though in court, some said that name never really existed. In 2013, while already in custody, Wilson made headlines again. He fathered a child with a federal officer, conceived during an unauthorized meeting in a staff restroom. But what brought him there started a decade earlier, March the 10th, 2003. Two undercover NYPD detectives, James Nemerin and Rodney Andrews, were working a gun trafficking case. Wilson set up a supposed firearms deal near the Stapleton houses. The detectives took the bait, but it wasn't a deal, it was an ambush. They were led to a second location in Staten Island. There, a crew member handed Wilson a .44 caliber revolver. Prosecutors said he knew. He knew they were officers. He pulled the trigger anyway, close range. Two detectives were left behind. Their car was gone. Police arrested him a few days later. At the time of his arrest, officers found rap lyrics in his pocket that detailed the shootings. The fatal shooting of two detectives made Wilson a high-priority federal target. His trial began on November 27, 2006, before Judge Nicholas Garofis in the Eastern District of New York. He faced multiple charges, including a top-level federal homicide count tied to racketeering, taking a vehicle by force that led to demises, weapons violations, conspiracy, attempted theft, and other counts. On December 20, 2006, the jury found him guilty on every charge. On January 30, 2007, he received the most severe punishment available under federal law at that time. Wilson's case then entered a long appeal process. In 2010, the Second Circuit Court set aside his punishment. The judges said the jury had been improperly told that his refusal to plead guilty or testify could count against him. The case went back for a new sentencing phase. In 2013, a different federal jury in Brooklyn again recommended the maximum punishment. On July 24, 2013, Judge Garofis imposed that sentence again. In March 2016, Judge Garofis reviewed new evidence about Wilson's mental capacity. He found that Wilson had significant intellectual disabilities. Under the Eighth Amendment, that finding made him ineligible for the harshest federal punishment. The government chose not to challenge this. His sentence was officially changed to life imprisonment without the possibility of early release. Why did prosecutors seek capital punishment again after it was overturned? They argued that the deliberate shooting of two undercover detectives warranted the highest level of justice. How did the intellectual disability finding change the final outcome? Once the court ruled in March 2016 that Wilson had significant intellectual disabilities, federal law barred the harshest punishment and led to a life-only sentence. Since 2016, Wilson has been held at a high-security federal prison in Florida. He is now 43 years old and will remain behind bars for life, with no chance of release. The next case started as a block party. It ended with an officer shot in the back. Christian Bay was 34 years old. He lived in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. In July 2019, he went to a block party in Homewood. That neighborhood is in northeast Pittsburgh. It was a summer evening, crowded, loud, and tense. Before that night, Bay had no record of high-profile offenses. What happened next moved very fast and ended tragically. Off-duty Pittsburgh police officer Calvin Hall was 36 then. He had stopped by the party to see relatives. He wasn't there in uniform, just his family. He wanted to help if things got out of hand. After trying to leave, he came back. His family had called him because his cousin felt threatened. Hall stepped in to calm a dispute. Witnesses said he raised his hands and tried to de-escalate. From behind, someone shot him 3 times in the back. He survived for 3 days in the hospital, then he passed away from his wounds. Investigators found a gun at the scene. Ballistics tests matched that weapon to the bullets. DNA on the gun linked it to Bay. Prosecutors used software called True Allele to sort mixed DNA samples. It's a probabilistic genotyping tool used in complex cases. An expert said the odds that the gun belonged to Bay were extremely high. This evidence led to charges of first-degree homicide and weapons offenses. The first trial did not end with a verdict. It was declared a mistrial because of improper character testimony. Prosecutors dropped plans to seek capital punishment. When the case went back to court in March 2023, they focused on the DNA proof and dash cam footage. The video showed Bay denying he had been at the party. His clothes matched descriptions from witnesses. Bay's defense team pointed out many distractions that night. It was dark. Lots of people were there. Some had firearms. They said witnesses could be mistaken. They also argued police rushed the case because one of their own was shot. They questioned the chain of custody, the software's reliability, and the timeline. A jury met for only 1 day before reaching a decision. On April 13, 2023, they found Bay guilty of first-degree homicide and multiple weapons charges. On July 10, 2023, Judge Kevin Sassanowski sentenced him to life in prison without parole. That sentence is mandatory under Pennsylvania law for first-degree homicide. At sentencing, Bay chose not to speak. 4 impact statements were read in court. Hall's mother and fiancé both spoke. Hall's fiancé said, "Our lives are forever changed. The pain is indescribable." His mother said, "From the day you were born, you gave us nothing but love. It has been very hard, because we know what we lost when you went away." She brought a photo of Hall in uniform and held it in front of her as she spoke. Prosecutors argued Bay did not know Hall was an officer. They said he acted out of impulse. He shot Hall 3 times in the back after Hall tried to help. The defense said the evidence was only circumstantial. They suggested someone else at the scene could have fired those shots. But the combination of DNA, ballistics, and video convinced the jury. As of July 2025, Christian Bay is 36 years old. He remains behind bars in Pennsylvania. He has no possibility of parole. He is housed in a maximum security state facility. His conviction has given Hall's family and Pittsburgh law enforcement a sense of closure. Up next are 3 weapons, 2 officers, 1 notebook. Kenneth Allen grew up in suburban Chicago. Public records offer few details about his early years or family. By his mid-30s, he had gained a reputation for unpredictable actions and a strong distrust of authority. In late 1978, he was living with Bianca Smith in what they called a common-law marriage. Tensions at home had grown dangerous. On December 10th, Bianca called police and said Allen was heavily armed and out of control. 3 days later, on December 13th, she called again. When officers arrived, he refused Bianca entry and showed them firearms. Witnesses reported he threatened to shoot any officer who stepped onto his property. The standoff lasted 19 tense hours. Neighbors and TV crews watched closely. In the end, he surrendered without firing a shot. While Allen remained in custody, a judge approved a search of his home. Officers found 6 handguns, a rifle, a shotgun, and over 1,000 rounds of ammo. Authorities believed he might have been planning something far worse. 3 months later, Allen visited a locksmith. He asked if the glass in police cars could stop bullets, hinting at plans that went far beyond self-defense. A few hours after that visit, he parked his brown Ford near 2 officers making a routine traffic stop. From inside his car, he fired a .45 semi-automatic pistol at Officer William Bosak. Bosak was hit 3 times and lost his life immediately. Allen then jumped out and drew a second pistol. He fired repeatedly at Officer Roger Van Schaik while they circled the cruiser. After running out of pistol rounds, Allen ran back to his car and grabbed a .30 caliber carbine. He aimed at the wounded Van Schaik, but the rifle jammed after 2 or 3 shots. Allen took Van Schaik's service revolver from Bosak's fallen body. He approached Van Schaik on the ground and fired twice at point-blank range. He stayed until backup units arrived. Then he sped off, emptying more magazines at the officers who pursued him. His flight ended when he crashed into 2 squad cars and a city bus. Officer Lawrence Rapian rammed Allen's car head-on to force him off the road. Inside Allen's vehicle, police found about 250 rounds of ammo and a notebook. That notebook listed names, addresses, phone numbers, and vehicle details for several officers, and even the judge who had signed the search warrant. In court, Allen said he believed Bosak had been part of the earlier standoff at his home. He claimed he was protesting what he saw as another violation of people's rights. In truth, neither Bosak nor Van Schaik had been at his house. His anger turned into a tragic, fatal mistake. Allen chose to represent himself. He admitted responsibility for the 2 fatalities. He argued his actions were a protest against police misconduct and his own mistreatment. The prosecution showed how carefully he had planned everything, buying ammunition, researching police car glass, keeping that notebook of targets. The jury agreed he had acted with clear planning. He received the harshest sentence under Illinois law. In 2003, the governor at the time reduced that sentence to life in prison without the possibility of release. Allen remains at Menard Correctional Center in Illinois serving out that sentence. Now, how can a routine stop sign check end with a motorcycle cop lying in the street? Kenneth Earl Gay was born in 1960, most likely in California. Very little is known about his early years. Public records show he had served time in prison. After his release, he lived in Los Angeles with his partner. He was married but shared a home with Pamela Cummings, mentioned in court papers. In photographs from the 1980s, he looked quite young. Thin, clean-shaven with a mustache and slicked-back hair, typical of LA street style at the time. There's no record of children or close family support. Court documents name Pamela Cummings, but offer no further details about his home life. Testimony later suggested the household was unstable, with frequent substance use and little employment. By early 1983, Gay and Raynard Cummings, together with their partners, carried out more than a dozen armed thefts across the San Fernando Valley. They targeted liquor stores, fast food chains, and small markets, usually just before closing time. On June 2, 1983, motorcycle officer Paul Verna stopped the car driven by Cummings. Gay sat in the passenger seat. They hadn't obeyed a stop sign. The car was stolen and they were carrying firearms. As Verna approached to check their IDs, Cummings fired a shot from inside the car. The officer fell. Gay got out, took the gun, and fired 5 more times into the fallen officer. He made sure Verna would not survive. At a retrial in 2023, prosecutors explained why they used such extreme measures. Gay and Cummings feared they would be sent back to prison for parole violations, stolen property, and weapons charges. They responded with fatal force to avoid going back behind bars. In 1985, separate juries found both men responsible for first-degree homicide. Each jury debated who fired the first shot. Both offenders received the final penalty. Gay's sentence cited 2 special factors. The victim was an officer, and the act was meant to prevent lawful arrest. Gay's final penalty was overturned twice by the California Supreme Court. In 1988, judges found his lawyer had failed to present key evidence and was later disbarred. After a new penalty phase trial in 2000, that sentence was also set aside. Then in 2020, the court threw out the entire conviction and ordered a fresh trial because of further counsel errors. By mid-2023, Gay faced a third trial, this time focusing only on guilt. The process was delayed by COVID-19 and even a flooded courtroom. Prosecutors showed photos of victims with bruises. They argued that Gay and Cummings used lethal force to avoid prison. Gay's defense team insisted he never pulled the trigger. Raynard Cummings testified that Gay did not fire any shots. Defense attorney Monica Thalen called it absolutely ridiculous to suggest Gay acted first. She also criticized earlier counsel for not presenting mitigating evidence. After 2 weeks, the jury again held Gay responsible for first-degree homicide with the 2 special factors. This time, the district attorney decided not to seek the final penalty. Judge Hayden Zaki sentenced Gay to life in prison without any possibility of release. It became his 3rd life term for the same incident. On November 27, 2023, Gay remained silent during his final hearing. His expression stayed blank. Officer Verna's widow, Sandy Jackson, spoke for the family. She said, "You were a coward then, and you remain a coward today." Now, why did the next individual spiral into chaos, and who paid the price? Stephen Shang was 47 and lived in Kentucky. He had a past felony conviction and had been caught with a handgun. Little is known about his childhood or family. What is clear is that he had a history of illegal behavior, weapons charges, and escalating encounters that led to May 22, 2023. On May 22, 2023, near Georgetown, Kentucky, Deputy Caleb Conley pulled over Shang's vehicle on Interstate 75. As the deputy approached the car, Shang rolled down his window and fired his weapon. The deputy did not survive. Conley had served 4 years with the Scott County Sheriff's Department and 8 years in the U.S. Army. He was 35, married, and had 2 young children. After that, Shang drove away. He forced his way into a nearby house and held the resident at gunpoint. He stole a van and headed to Lexington. At a bar called Rose and Jim's, he shot a man named David DiLeonardo. DiLeonardo survived but needed 4 surgeries and spent 4 months in the hospital. No clear motive has emerged. Some think he panicked and feared being caught. His rapid, harsh actions suggest he was determined to get away at any cost. Police identified him quickly. A detective matched images from the highway stop and social media. They linked him to a recent theft in Kenton County. Officers arrested him in Lexington the next day. He faced 14 felony charges across 3 counties. These included taking the life of a law enforcement officer, unlawful entry, holding a person at gunpoint, stealing vehicles, possession of a firearm by someone with a felony record, fleeing officers, reckless endangerment, and more. On January 28, 2025, in Scott County Circuit Court, he entered a guilty plea for ending the deputy's life and related acts. He gave up several lesser charges. He also waived his right to a formal sentencing hearing and did not appear in court. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without any chance of release, plus an extra 70 years on other counts. Kentucky's Attorney General said this outcome sends a strong message. Someone who ends the life of a law officer will face the harshest penalty. In court, emotions ran high. Deputy Conley's wife, Rachel, spoke through tears. She said her husband never had a fair chance to defend himself. She noted he was just 35, while Shang will see every day of his sentence coming. Conley's mother, Jolene, told the defendant she saw no remorse in his eyes, only anger. Records from the Bourbon County Detention Center paint a picture of ongoing danger. While waiting for sentencing, Shang struck other detainees with a broom handle. He smashed a television and punched walls. He even discussed plans to harm a female officer and tried to break out. Officials moved him between facilities to keep others safe. What forces someone to take a paramedic against her will and turn a commuter highway into a crime scene? Jeremy Alexander Smith grew up in South Carolina. He had a long record of serious wrongdoing. This included armed theft, burglary, taking hostages, and many jail infractions. In mid-March 2024, Smith crossed a line. On March 14th, he took 52-year-old paramedic Phoenicia Machado Foy from her home in Marion County, South Carolina. He forced her into her BMW. In a methodical manner, he fired at her in a secluded area. Then he stole her car and began fleeing across state lines. What drove him to this level? Prosecutors said it was planned. He used a stolen gun taken from her roommate. That showed it was not an impulsive act. Just before dawn on March 15th, 2024, Smith appeared on Interstate 40 near Tucumcari, New Mexico. He drove Machado Foy's white BMW with a flat tire. New Mexico State Police Officer Justin Hare, a 35-year-old father of two who had served since 2018, stopped to help. The morning air was cold and tense. Officer Hare offered a ride into town. When he stepped around the car, Smith pulled out a 9mm pistol. He fired once at the forehead. Then he moved to the driver's window and fired twice more at the neck and cheek. Officer Hare fell. Smith shoved him into the passenger seat and sped off in the patrol car. Why the extra shots? Court records and dashcam footage show he wanted no chance of being caught. He made sure Officer Hare could not get up. The stolen cruiser sped west at up to 110 miles per hour. Smith crashed in Guadalupe County. He dragged Officer Hare to the roadside. Then he ran off on foot. Officer Hare's radio sent out a distress call. A search began immediately. Medics arrived quickly, but Officer Hare passed away at 7:21 a.m. Smith kept running. He carjacked a flatbed truck in Cuervo. Police say he aimed to reach an ex-girlfriend in Albuquerque. On March 17th, gas station clerks spotted his name on bulletins. They alerted law enforcement. A pursuit followed. There was an exchange of gunfire. Smith dropped his weapon and was arrested. He first appeared in federal court on March 22, 2024. He faced several charges, including carjacking that led to a fatality, weapons offenses, unlawful restraint resulting in death, and possession of stolen firearms. Prosecutors had the option to seek the maximum punishment, but that possibility was removed later by the Attorney General. To avoid a full trial, Smith pled guilty on January 17, 2025. He agreed to accept life without the possibility of release. This settled all federal counts against him. On April 21, 2025, a judge gave him life without release in federal prison. During sentencing, the dashcam video was described in court. Officer Hare's family spoke about the horror of hearing the first shot and then two more at close range. One question remains. Could faster backup have changed the outcome? The dashcam timeline offers little doubt that Smith acted with cold precision. Another question is whether South Carolina will bring charges over Machado Foy's case. No trial date or plans for state-level prosecution have been confirmed. Jeremy Smith is now 33 and serving life in federal custody. He stands convicted of a shocking series of acts. Now, is it possible that a former soldier's own training led him to open fire on the people sent to help? Grady Wayne Wilks was born in 1989, probably in or near Opelika, Alabama. We deduce this from his later home in Auburn and his service in the Alabama National Guard. He grew up in a working-class family. He showed interest in the military from an early age. By 2010, he had joined the Alabama National Guard. He went on to lead an infantry fire team. This suggests he valued discipline and clear rules. At the time of the shooting incident, his girlfriend Brooklyn Flaherty, also known as Isaacs, lived with him. They had a child together. Their relationship became a key focus during the trial. On May 19, 2019, police in Auburn went to a mobile home on Wire Road around 10:40 p.m. They were responding to a report of a domestic incident. Brooklyn had fled the home after he hurt her and made it hard for her to breathe. She told officers that Grady was a threat to her life. Officers William Buchner, Evan Elliott, Webb Sistrunk, and Ron Axelson wore body armor and knocked on Wilks's door. He answered while dressed in military gear and carrying at least one rifle and a Glock pistol. Almost at once, he opened fire. Officer Buchner passed away from his wounds. Sistrunk and Elliott were hurt, but survived. Axelson was shot at, but was not harmed. Wilks ran away but was arrested the next morning, less than a mile away. What set off the shooting? Was it planned? Or did it come from a break in his mental state? Prosecutors said Wilks set up like a soldier and fired on purpose at every officer on the porch. The defense said he was suffering from bipolar llers disorder, PTSD, and was a heavy drinker. They argued that his training made him react by shooting when he panicked. Jury selection began on July 31, 2022. Over 75 people were turned away to find jurors who could judge both mental health and use of force fairly. The trial itself opened on August 7, 2023. The prosecution showed body camera video of Buchner's last words, "Lord, help me." Officers testified they saw Wilks aiming and shooting through covered windows. He looked ready for battle. Wilks then spoke in his own defense. He admitted he had hurt Brooklyn, wore body armor, and loaded his gun. He said this was to protect himself from fear. He described a rage that overtook him. "The sadness inside of me turned into a rage. I loved you, and you took everything from me. I grabbed her by the neck," he said. He claimed that when officers came back, he thought they might shoot him first. He said his military training made him fire back without thinking. Expert witnesses said Wilks's bipolar I, PTSD from childhood, and addiction affected his mind. A forensic psychologist testified that these issues made him unaware of what he was doing. The jury later decided that he was not legally insane. On August 15th, the jury found Wilks responsible for taking Buchner's life. They also found he tried to shoot Elliott and Sistrunk. They cleared him of trying to shoot Axelson. At sentencing, jurors had to choose between life in prison or capital punishment. On August 17th, 2023, they gave him life without early release. They did not impose the harsher option. In his final statement, Wilks spoke to the Buchner family. "I'm so sorry. I can't put it into words. I can never make it up to you. I can never get him back. I'm so sorry," he said. His words showed genuine regret, even if they came too late. Up next is an officer down, a motive missing, a neighborhood in shock. Emanuel Manesha was 50 when he appeared in a Fulton County court in August 2022. Nothing in public records tells us his exact birth date, childhood, or family background. What is clear is that by March 2015, he was living in South Fulton, Georgia, and headed for a serious run-in with the law. In the early hours of March 4th, 2015, dispatch got a call. Neighbors in the Parks of Cedar Grove subdivision reported shots and a loud disturbance. Several officers hurried over. Detective Terrence Green was among them. He had served the Fulton County Police Department for 22 years. By the time they reached the house, Manesha had already left. He then armed himself with an AK-47 rifle. Over the next few minutes, he opened fire at nearby homes and at the officers on the scene. We still don't know his exact motive. It could have been anger, despair, or a sudden breakdown. There is no sign he was defending himself or aiming at any one person. Officers returned fire from a safe distance. Amid flashes and echoes, Manesha was struck several times. At that point, they were able to take him into custody. Detective Green, seeking cover, was hit in the back of the head. He was rushed to the hospital but passed away on March 15, 2015. Manesha's actions left more than one officer injured. He faced 33 charges total. Those included intentional homicide, attempt to commit homicide, harm to officers, and other related counts. The case could have led to the most severe penalty. But in August 2022, he chose a plea deal. He admitted guilt on all 33 counts. Judge Jane Barwick then sentenced him to life behind bars plus 375 years. She said this outcome makes clear that acts of harm toward officers carry the toughest consequences. Manesha likely took this route to avoid the risk of the highest penalty. By pleading guilty, he spared Detective Green's family a long trial and guaranteed he would remain in prison. The district attorney said she hopes this verdict brings relief and a sense of justice to Detective Green's loved ones and colleagues. The South Fulton police chief added that it shows acts of harm toward officers have no place in the state. Detective Green is remembered for his steady 22 years of service. He left behind a wife and 4 sons, Marquez, Samuel, Isaiah, and Emanuel, whose lives changed forever in a matter of seconds. The next man ran from a gas station. Hours later, a veteran officer was shot in the head. Stephen Lance Hurd grew up in Texas. As he grew older, he struggled with heavy drinking and other substances. He also stole personal information and used it to cash checks. Over time, he became tied to a white supremacist group in prison called the Aryan Brotherhood. He was arrested several times and placed on probation and parole. He broke those rules more than once. In late 2005, police were already looking for him because of parole violations. They suspected him of using stolen identities to cash checks. On November 27th, 2005. Hurd pulled up to a gas station in Sansom Park with two women in his truck. One of the women tried to pay with a bank card. The pump didn't work. The clerk wrote down the truck's license plate. Hurd got nervous. He drove off fast. Police chased him into a nearby field. The truck got stuck. Hurd jumped out and ran away on foot. He left the two women behind. They told officers he might have a weapon. Inside the truck, police found tools for forging documents. Officer Henry Hank Nava Jr. worked with the Fort Worth Critical Response Team. He and officers Stephen Myers and Ernesto Tamayo went to a trailer in Fort Worth. They planned to search for Hurd. They knocked on the door wearing police uniforms. Hurd had been hiding inside. He grabbed a gun from a closet. He fired at the officers through the front door. One bullet struck Officer Nava in the head. The next afternoon, Officer Nava passed away. Hurd climbed out a window. He held a woman inside the trailer for several hours. Finally, SWAT officers surrounded the house. Hurd gave himself up. Prosecutors said Hurd feared going back to prison. His parole officer had warned him the police were looking for him. Friends also said Hurd had threatened to shoot officers if they came for him. Ballistics tests showed he aimed directly toward the doorway. Experts agreed he meant to hit someone, not just fire randomly. At trial, the defense argued that Hurd might not have known they were police. They said the trailer's walls were thin and the air conditioning was loud. Neighbors, however, said officers arrived in unmarked cars but showed badges and shouted police before they went in. Hurd was tried for first-degree homicide. Prosecutors laid out a timeline showing he stole identities, ran from police, threatened officers, and shot even after they called for help. After about 4 hours of discussion, the jury found him guilty. In November 2007, he was sentenced to life in prison without any chance of parole. Jurors chose that sentence because they felt he showed no remorse and remained loyal to the Aryan Brotherhood. Around early 2021, reports said Hurd passed away in a Texas prison hospital at about age 59. Hurd's ambush inside that trailer shocked the community. Yet how does one inmate turn a prison corridor into a battlefield? Jesse Konui was born in 1977 in Manila, Philippines. Around 1986, his mother married a U.S. service member. The family moved to Rome, New York. They lived in poverty. Jesse got into trouble early. His brother said Jesse once showed promise. In his late teens, Jesse began drinking heavily and using illegal substances. He also took part in street theft. By 1995, Jesse was sent to prison for taking a car without permission. He was released in 2001. Instead of starting fresh, he joined a gang. He was involved in armed theft, the movement of large amounts of controlled substances, and several dangerous confrontations. While in prison, he was repeatedly involved in disruptive incidents. There were fights with makeshift weapons and other prisoners. On August the 25th, 2002, Jesse lured a fellow gang member, Carlos Garcia, to a laundromat in Phoenix. Two accomplices waited there. They shot Garcia. Then Jesse fired 4 more rounds into Garcia's head, ending his life. Jesse later admitted what he did. In 2008, an Arizona court gave him a life sentence without the possibility of release. In June 2003, federal agents arrested Jesse for moving over 5 kilograms of controlled substances tied to a New Mexican mafia group. He pleaded guilty in 2005. A federal judge gave him an 11-year sentence. By 2009, Jesse was serving both sentences at USP Canaan in Pennsylvania. On February 25, 2013, he positioned himself at the top of a stairwell. Officer Eric Williams was coming up the steps. Jesse kicked him down. He then used 2 homemade sharp objects. He cut Williams more than 200 times. He also stomped and kicked Williams while over 100 inmates watched silently. When asked why, Jesse said, "That fool disrespected me." In June 2017, prosecutors showed an 11-minute recording of the stairwell incident in a Scranton federal courtroom. The defense team admitted Jesse's role but argued against the most severe penalty. The jury found him guilty of the most serious charge on June 7, 2017. 11 jurors voted for the harshest punishment. 1 juror refused. U.S. law requires all 12 jurors to agree for that penalty. Because of the holdout, Jesse was given life without hope of release on July 10, 2017. On July 11, 2017, the Department of Justice confirmed the life sentence. The punishment was formally imposed that October by Judge Caputo. The jury foreperson later said she agreed to life because her own son was in prison. Another juror held out until the end. The jury even paused to pray together. They hoped both Jesse's family and Officer Williams's family could find some peace. Officer Williams's father, Don, was devastated. In court, he shouted that the sentence showed his son's value was worth absolutely nothing. He and prison staff groups called for stronger legal safeguards for corrections officers. They pointed to a proposal called Eric's Law. Federal rules currently block a second jury review. Congress has not yet approved that change. Up next is one question, one answer, and then 3 shots at point-blank range. If you're still with us, consider subscribing for more important stories like these. Demetrius Blackwell lived in New York. He had a record of past offenses that went back years. In 2000, he served 5 years behind bars for trying to take a life. By May 2015, he was 35 and lived in Queens Village. Prosecutors noted he had severe epilepsy. He'd had brain surgery a few years before the incident. His defense said this affected his judgment that evening. But was that enough of a reason? Did those close to the case feel the same? On May 2nd, 2015, at about 6:15 p.m., plainclothes NYPD officers Brian Moore and Eric Jansen saw Blackwell in Queens Village. He seemed to adjust his waistband. Officer Moore rolled down his window and asked, "Have you got something?" Blackwell said, "Yes, I have something," then opened fire from less than 5 feet away. Witnesses later picked him out of a lineup. Tests matched the .38 caliber Taurus revolver to the bullet casings. DNA on the gun also linked back to Blackwell. What made him shoot so quickly? Prosecutors said he aimed at Moore because he was an officer. Officer Moore was critically hurt. One bullet struck his head. Another broke apart, causing severe facial injuries. Jansen dove behind the car and walked away with no injuries. Moore was rushed to Jamaica Hospital, but he passed away 2 days later on May 4th, 2015. The prosecution described Blackwell as a calculating person who opened fire without warning. They said he reacted out of anger and intent, not fear. His defense team argued that epilepsy and past brain surgery caused a break with reality. They said his actions weren't fully under his own control, but medical records showed no diagnosed mental disorder at trial. About 90 minutes after the shooting, police arrested Blackwell nearby. He broke down in tears in the squad car. 2 months later, in June 2015, he faced formal charges. The counts included causing an injury that led to passing, attempting to cause such an injury, aggravated harm to an officer, and unlawful weapon possession. The trial began in October 2017. The prosecution laid out strong evidence. They had 3 eyewitness accounts. They had DNA proof on the revolver. They had a ballistic match to the bullets that hit Officer Moore. They argued Blackwell targeted Moore because of his status. The defense admitted the shooting but stressed Blackwell's epilepsy and possible blackouts before the event. Jurors did not accept the defense. On November 9th, 2017, they found Blackwell guilty on all counts. It took them 2 hours to reach that verdict. On December 19th, 2017, Queens Supreme Court Judge Gregory Lassac handed down the sentence. He gave Blackwell a life term with no chance of release. The judge told him, "You will never breathe fresh air outside." He called Blackwell dangerous and cowardly. Throughout the trial, Blackwell stayed emotionless. He even smirked during the judge's remarks. Officer Brian Moore was honored after his passing. He was promoted to detective first grade. He had 5 years on the force, made 150 arrests, and earned several medals. Moore's mother shared her grief. She said her world was turned upside down. His father spoke outside court. He said if the state had a harsher penalty, he would support it. The strong sentence brought relief to both the family and law enforcement. The Patrolmen's Benevolent Association said the message was clear. Aiming at an officer carries the highest consequences. The next man said what he did was a stress response. The court called it intent. Ian McCarthy was born in 1980. There isn't much public information about his early life. However, during his trial, a psychiatrist testified that McCarthy had gone through extremely difficult experiences as a child. He was mistreated in several ways and also had a serious head injury. The doctor said this may have caused long-term mental health issues. These included post-traumatic stress, especially when he was under pressure, like during police stops. On the night of August 6, 2017, Officer Gary Lee Michael Jr., who was 37 years old and worked for the Clinton Police Department in Missouri, pulled McCarthy over. It was meant to be a regular traffic stop, but things escalated very quickly. McCarthy got out of his SUV. He had a powerful weapon with him. He used it on Officer Michael, aiming at his chest. Officer Michael could not survive the injury. McCarthy then drove off but crashed his vehicle into a ditch. After that, he ran away on foot. Police launched a 2-day search to find him. They used surveillance video and information from people nearby to confirm who he was. They also found McCarthy's phone near the crash site. When other officers got to the scene, they found Officer Michael unresponsive. Even though they tried to save him right away, it was too late. Why did McCarthy do it? His defense said his past trauma and mental health struggles were triggered during the traffic stop. They claimed his stress reaction made him act out in a dangerous way. But the prosecution gave a different explanation. Prosecutors said bringing the weapon showed clear planning and intent to cause harm. He wasn't trying to avoid arrest before it happened. He simply acted with intent. 2 days after the incident, McCarthy was found in a rural area of Henry County. He was charged with several offenses, but the focus during the trial was on the most serious one. In June 2023, a jury found him responsible after a 5-day trial. The evidence included a match between the weapon and the injury, video footage, phone records, and witnesses who saw him run away. During sentencing, the jury had 2 options: life in prison without the chance of release, or a more severe punishment. They couldn't agree on which one to choose. That meant the final decision was up to Judge Marco A. Roldan following Missouri law. McCarthy's lawyers argued this was unfair. They said only a jury should be allowed to make such a big decision. They referred to the 8th Amendment, which protects people from extreme punishment. They asked the judge to give him life without parole. They also said Missouri was different from most states when it comes to these laws. Missouri's Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, supported the original prosecution's side. The trial was moved to another county to avoid outside influence and make witness travel easier. On September 8, 2023, Judge Roldan made his decision. McCarthy would spend the rest of his life in prison with no chance of release. The judge said Missouri law gave him the power to decide when a jury could not. Judge Roldan also said this was a rare situation in his entire 27-year career. McCarthy's legal team had hoped that his mental health history and childhood experiences would lead to a lighter sentence, but the seriousness of what happened outweighed those factors. A psychiatrist from the jail also spoke in court, but that didn't change the outcome. McCarthy's lawyers are still working to challenge Missouri's rules for sentencing. They continue to focus on whether a judge making this kind of decision is fair under the Constitution. The case raises some big questions. Why did McCarthy have that weapon with him that day? Should the court have paid more attention to his difficult past? Can mental health struggles ever explain such actions? The court gave a clear answer, no, but his legal team thinks otherwise and is appealing the case further. Ian McCarthy is now 45 years old. He's serving his sentence in a Missouri state facility. He has no chance of release, but his lawyers are still working on appeals. The next step could come from a higher court. The next individual had a long record, but nothing like this. Tyrus Matthews grew up in Detroit, Michigan. He had a difficult childhood. He got into trouble with the law early on. His family life was unstable. Little is known about his parents or siblings. He moved around a lot. He lacked steady support. As a teenager, Matthews began with minor unlawful acts. Those acts grew more serious over time. In his early 20s, he was convicted of evading police. He also held up places with a weapon. He attempted to cause serious harm using a weapon. His record showed a pattern of increasing aggressiveness and resistance. On July 23, 2010, Corporal Matthew Edwards and his partner went to investigate a break-in at the Copper Tree Apartments in Taylor, Michigan. Edwards was 31 years old. He had been named Officer of the Year in 2008 for handling dangerous situations calmly. When they arrived, they saw Matthews. He matched the description of the person involved in the break-in. What began as a normal check turned tragic. Matthews fired his weapon. Edwards suffered fatal wounds and passed away at the scene. His partner, Corporal Gregory Pichi, was seriously hurt. Why did Matthews do this? His motive seems to be panic and defiance. He was trying to flee from the officers. When they grabbed him, he reacted with force. He chose confrontation instead of surrendering. Was this a split-second choice or a planned act? The jury decided it was a planned act to take a life. Matthews was taken into custody at the scene. Prosecutors said his past record and this reaction proved he meant to take a life. The defense said he did not plan to harm anyone. They argued he fired in panic and did not aim at Edwards. During the trial, harsh details came out. Matthews had past convictions for holding up places with a weapon and trying to cause serious harm. A prison psychologist testified that Matthews was a dangerous and aggressive person. At sentencing, Matthews spoke to the judge. He snapped at the court with defiant words. "I'm not your boy. I'm not your coward. Power to the people." Then he made an obscene gesture. He said he would appeal. The room was tense. In November 2011, the jury found him guilty of first-degree unlawful taking of life and related charges. He received 2 life sentences with no chance of release. One sentence covered the officer's passing. The other covered the injury to Piche. These sentences will run one after the other. In court, Matthews showed no remorse. Prison staff said he remained unrepentant. The judge offered no leniency. Corporal Edwards' passing left a deep mark on the Taylor Police Department and his family. His wife, Shan, said she found peace knowing Matthews would never come home. Edwards' father, a minister, spoke about forgiveness. He hoped Matthews would seek mercy in the life to come. This case raised questions. Did Matthews really plan to take a life? or did panic lead to tragedy? The jury decided it did not matter. He chose to fire his weapon. His past actions showed he was a danger. The court made sure he could not harm anyone again. The next man was on parole. He ran from police. Then came the shot that ended everything. Thomas Johnson III grew up in Rochester, New York. Court records show he had run into the law before. He served time for an attempted theft. He was out on parole, but he broke the rules just weeks before September 3, 2014. On that day, local officers tried to pull over a car where Johnson was a passenger. They did this because he had run away when they first approached him. Later, officers Daryl Pearson and Michael DePaula spotted Johnson walking nearby. He ran from them again. The chase moved into the Hudson Avenue neighborhood. Officer Pearson went after Johnson on foot. When Pearson closed in, Johnson pulled out a small pistol. He aimed at Pearson and fired once, at very close range. Pearson did not survive the wound. A stray bullet also grazed a bystander. That person was hurt but recovered. Officer DePaula returned fire. He hit Johnson, and Johnson was taken into custody. He went to the hospital for treatment. At Johnson's trial in May 2015, the main question was why he fired that shot. The state said he did it so he would not go back to prison after his parole slip-up. The defense said the weapon went off by accident during the struggle. The jury had to decide if Johnson meant to harm Officer Pearson or if it was a panic-driven mistake. Johnson faced 6 charges: causing the officer's passing, trying to cause serious harm, and several counts of having weapons. Over 6 days, witnesses described what they saw. The state showed video of the chase. Officer DePaula and Pearson's partner spoke about what happened. Experts linked Johnson to the car. After 3 days of thinking it over, the jury found Johnson responsible on 5 of the 6 counts. They cleared him on 1 count of serious harm. In July 2015, Judge Thomas Moran gave him life behind bars without any chance of release. He added 55 more years for the other counts. At the hearing, Officer Pearson's wife spoke. She said she forgave Johnson but believed he should face hard consequences. Officer DePaula described the emotional toll the incident took on him. When Johnson spoke, he said he felt sorry but denied meaning to fire at the officer. He claimed, "I am guilty only of being a black man on the street with a Newport and a pistol. I believe it's not wrong to run from police." The witnesses all lied under oath. People asked if the first stop was fair. Some said the tactic of stopping Johnson was based on his race. That view raised questions about how that decision set off the events. Others pointed to Johnson's choice to run, pull out a weapon, and fire as proof that his actions were planned. Officer Pearson was 32 at the time. He had served 8 years with the Rochester Force and had also been in the National Guard in Afghanistan. He left behind a wife and 2 young children. The next officer walked into the woods and never came out. John Russell Hall was born in 1971. He lived in Pikeville, Kentucky. Before this event, he had been arrested for theft and for having a weapon without permission. He kept mostly to himself and had limited contact with family. On the evening of March 13, 2018, Officer Scotty Hamilton of the Pikeville Police and Trooper Matt Martin of the Kentucky State Police went to the Hurricane Creek area. They were checking out a vehicle that looked out of place. They talked briefly with the people in that vehicle, then moved on to search nearby homes. At one point, the 2 officers got separated. Trooper Martin suddenly heard gunfire. What followed stunned the whole town. Officer Hamilton had served for 12 years and was 35 years old. When help arrived, they saw he had serious gunshot wounds. He passed away there. His wife, Chelsea, and their 9-month-old daughter, Brinley, faced life without him. The small community and his fellow officers remembered him for his friendly nature and bright smile. Hall was already wanted on theft charges from earlier that day. He ran from the area but was caught about 36 hours later at a house on the Pike-Floyd County line. Authorities warned he might have weapons and could be dangerous. In his past, Hall had been found guilty of theft and of having a weapon illegally. There may have been other serious offenses, though full details aren't public. His record of past convictions was a key factor in the charges against him. Investigators believe Hall opened fire to avoid being arrested. He shot at Officer Hamilton when the officer came upon his hiding place. It was an ambush. Hall later told the court he had deliberately shot the officer. In March 2018, a grand jury brought 11 charges against Hall. These included a major unlawful fatal shooting, having a weapon despite past convictions, receiving stolen items, and a pattern of serious offenses. At his first hearing, he pleaded not guilty. At a pre-trial meeting on March 29th, the judge denied bail. Investigators then gave over 3,000 pages of evidence to his lawyers. On December 19th, 2018, Hall accepted a plea agreement. He admitted guilt to the major unlawful fatal shooting and to having a weapon as someone with past convictions. Prosecutors dropped 3 other charges. This deal meant he would not face the harshest penalty. It's unclear whether he showed any real regret. Officials did not report remorse. Witnesses said Hall showed little emotion in court and did not apologize. Under the plea agreement, Hall received a life sentence with no chance of parole. He also received a 10-year term for the weapon charge, served at the same time. His defense did not oppose the sentence. Judge Eddie Coleman made it official on December 19, 2018. In court, Chelsea Hamilton spoke about how they would never fully heal. She said, "I will probably never have closure. We're going to have to live with this the rest of our lives." Watching Hall leave the courtroom, his family and fellow officers knew he would no longer pose a risk. Chelsea added, "Today was hard, but I'm glad that it's over. Brindley and I, that's what Scotty would have wanted." People remembered Officer Hamilton for being kind and dedicated. 1 year later, the town held candlelight gatherings and set up trust funds for Brindley. They even declared January 11th, matching his badge number 111, as Scotty Hamilton Day. Friends spoke of his warm smile and helpful spirit. 4 people who helped Hall hide were also sentenced. 3 received 4-year terms and 1 got probation. John Russell Hall remains held at the Carter County Detention Center. He will stay there for the rest of his life. The next 19-year-old stepped out of a Honda and left 3 officers injured on the ground. Eddie Miller was born in 2002 in Richmond, Texas. He grew up in the Houston metro area. He lived with his parents, who later showed up in court during his trial. Not much is publicly known about his early life. His school history, work background, or personal habits weren't shared. However, court records did mention that he didn't have a job when the incident happened. His family seemed supportive. During the trial, when the verdict was read, Miller looked at them and gave a small fist pump. He was 19 years old when the incident happened. By the time the trial ended in April 2025, he was 22. The event took place on October 16th, 2021, outside a place called 45 Norte Sports Bar in North Houston. 3 Harris County Precinct 4 deputy constables were working a private job there after the bar had closed. A fight had broken out, and the deputies were trying to stop it by detaining someone. At that moment, Miller stepped out of a nearby parked Honda Accord. He was wearing a ski mask. He had brought an AR-15 style rifle with him. That rifle had been reported as stolen. Why did he do it? Was this random or something he planned? According to prosecutors, this wasn't random. They believed it was a targeted act. The deputies were wearing clearly marked vests that showed they were with law enforcement. Miller came up behind them and fired multiple times. Deputy Kareem Atkins, who was 30 years old, was hit in the back. The bullets hit his lungs and he lost his life right there. Another deputy, Daryl Garrett, was also shot in the back. His injuries were very serious, causing spinal damage. He was left unable to walk. A third deputy, Yukaim Barthen, was hit in the leg and suffered damage to his muscles. Barthen later described in court that he believed he wouldn't survive. He crawled behind a vehicle and managed to call 911. Once the shots were fired, Miller ran away on foot. He dropped both the rifle and his ski mask while leaving. The deputies were left injured on the ground. Did Miller think he could escape? Did he know exactly who he was firing at? Prosecutors said yes. They believed he meant to hurt them and continued to fire even after some had fallen. In court, one prosecutor said he had no regard for human life whatsoever. Police investigated using security camera footage from nearby. They also looked at bar transaction records, statements from witnesses, and checked the registration of the car Miller had used. That helped link him to the event. He was found 2 months later in Richmond. He was riding in a car with his mother when he was taken into custody. He did not resist. Miller was charged with several serious offenses. These included the loss of Deputy Atkins, as well as trying to harm Garrett and Barthen. He was also accused of hurting law enforcement officers. Since he was under 21 and not legally allowed inside the bar at the time, that was noted too. He remained in jail without bail from December 2021 until the end of the trial in 2025. The trial started in early April 2025. Witnesses recalled what happened in detail. Barthen testified while holding back tears. He remembered how he struggled just to make the emergency call. Other deputies showed the court the uniforms they were wearing that night. Their vests proved that they were clearly marked as law enforcement. The prosecutor, Catherine Rogers, told the court that the act was planned. She said, "They never had a chance. He had no regard for human life whatsoever." Miller's lawyer, Joe David Wells, disagreed. He said the case was rushed. He claimed the evidence wasn't complete. He pointed to DNA found on the rifle and car key fob that didn't match Miller. Did the jury believe that? No. After 21 days of testimony, they only needed 2 hours to decide. Miller did not testify in his defense. He showed almost no emotion, just another small fist pump toward his parents. On April 17, 2025, the jury found Eddie Miller guilty. Under Texas law, this meant he would spend the rest of his life in prison, with no chance of release. The prosecutors chose not to request the most extreme punishment allowed by law. Still, they pushed for the highest penalty short of that. Miller's defense team said they would appeal the decision. They planned to focus on the unknown DNA evidence. As the verdict was read, law enforcement officers paid tribute to Deputy Atkins. Constable Mark Herman, the head of Precinct 4, spoke in court. He said, "I pray this verdict will bring a small sense of comfort to his family.